Everybody's good?
Hey, Drew, congrats,
Yeah,
bud.
thank you.
I know this is the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but just if you could talk about the foundation that was planted in West Lafayette with Purdue.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a Texas kid, grew up in Austin. Never thought I'd leave the state of Texas, to be quite honest. All my family was there, had a lot of roots there. But wanted to play college athletics, and I always thought it would be baseball. It ended up being football, and my opportunities coming out were Purdue, Kentucky, and Brown. And I chose Purdue because of its academic reputation, playing in the Big Ten. Very quickly you realize all the incredible things about Purdue. I was very quickly, I learned about the cradle of quarterbacks. That's something that still probably a lot of people don't recognize about the university, and the strong tradition of quarterbacks going back to Len Dawson, of course, Bob Greasy, Mike Phipps, Gary Danielson, Mark Herman, Jim Everett, Scott Campbell, and then when Joe Tiller got there in 1997 and began recruiting Texas again, which there was a stint where Purdue really wasn't going down and recruiting Texas, and then that brought me up to Purdue, and then Kyle Orton came on the heels of me, and then Curtis Painter. So I think we've had about 10 NFL quarterbacks out of Purdue University. So if you want to be a quarterback or an astronaut, go to Purdue. But it was honestly it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Was coming up to West Lafayette, Indiana. Not only did I get an incredible education, but some of my best friends in the world are my college roommates and guys that I played with. I met my wife, Brittany. Just the Purdue family. Everywhere I go, I meet Purdue people, and not only do I meet them, but they are so proud to be Purdue alumni. So I think just the reputation that Purdue has around the country in regards to the quality of the academic degrees, but just the leadership positions that so many Purdue alumni hold around the country. It's just it makes me really proud to have had the opportunity to go there. Yes. Oh, you're good. I can hear you.
Yeah, congratulations. The preparation leading into this week, has it at all been comparable to game prep?
To game prep? I'd say that, well, first off, it's so much to plan for, and my wife has really spearheaded, so much of the preparation in regards to helping family and friends and everybody get here and, make their arrangements, but also planning the party, which the party is really like a massive wedding reception, and I think what we've been told is that, it's going to be 5 days that's just a total blur, but really try to enjoy the moment. I think that's what I've tried to tell myself is, you work so hard and stress so much leading up to the moment to make sure that it's right for everybody who's coming here to be a part of this celebration with you. The way I really look at it is, this is my opportunity to convey my appreciation and gratitude to so many of the people, the places that were a part of this journey. And that's what I'm most looking forward to, is all the people I'm going to have a chance to see and appreciate and let them know just how valued they are. And also, every interaction I have with the current Hall of Famers is, it just sinks in even more and more just what an incredible honor this is, and just what the game of football has meant to, not just to me in my life, but to so many people and to so many communities. It just reinforces what an incredible game this is.
Hi, Drew. Congratulations, Corey Kuffler with WQAD. When this class was announced back in February, you had some really nice things to say about Roger Craig and his gameplay. Do you still feel that way, and what does it mean to have him part of this class?
Nothing's changed. Yeah, Roger Craig was a pioneer in this game at the running back position. The West Coast offense is one that really revolutionized the offensive football in the NFL with Bill Walsh. And then you look at all the West Coast disciples, that came, after that, the Mike Holmgrens, you know, and John Gruden's and Sean Payton's and so many others. And, you know, I remember watching that grainy footage, you know, when I was early in my career. You know, we'd pull up the old film, you know, that was whatever, the 8mm that was transferred to VHS, that was transferred to Beta, that was eventually made its way onto our hard drives, and we were able to access, you know. And, you know, you're sitting there watching the OGs, you know, the guys who really revolutionized offensive football. And Roger Craig was at the center of that because the running back position was so versatile in those offenses, not just handing the ball to inside, outside, but just what the role they played in the passing game, and the way that, you know, as we used to say, the offensive game, the passing game became an extension of the run game in the way that you were able to get the ball out of your hands quickly into your playmakers' hands and allow them to go front up the defense and make plays. And, you know, Roger Craig was, you know, that first thousand, you know, guy that I think many running backs that came through those systems modeled themselves after.
How you doing, Drew? Tom Long with Forward Ops TV and the Disability Channel. Being a 100% disabled veteran, knowing all the things that you used to do with the USO, what was your favorite moment with the USO? Do you miss it? And are you going to be looking forward to doing some more things with veterans?
Absolutely. I have such a profound respect for our military community, all those who serve, all those who have served, and sacrificed so much for our country and for this world. Some of my greatest memories over the last 20 years from my playing days were the opportunities to go on many of those USO trips. You know, I went on 5 of them to 10 different countries. And the experiences that I had, just the interactions with troops. First off, so many of them are massive football fans. And, you know, you feel like you playing on Sundays was, you know, a representation of them. You know, they would be getting up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, wherever they were in the world, to watch, you know, their favorite teams play or their favorite players play. And so it just gave them a taste of home and a connection to home. And so just to hear those stories was awesome. And then what was really great, too, on those USO trips is, you know, they were very proud about what they did, what they've been trained to do. And so they would want to bring you along and allow you to experience all those things. And so I had a chance to do some really fun things with the military. You know, riding in the back of a Chinook helicopter over Afghanistan with my feet just kind of dangling off the back like I was on the back of a Ford pickup truck or something. To, you know, running obstacle courses in Djibouti, Africa, to getting up early in the morning in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and doing PT with the Marines. And that's where a lot of the inspiration for some of our pregame chants came from. In fact, the one that everybody's probably most familiar with, the 1, 2, win for you, 3, 4, win some more, that was truly birthed from PT with the Marines at Guantanamo Bay. You know, early in the morning, running, sweating, and they're just barking out those cadence. And I'm just sitting there thinking in my mind, I am taking this back to my team. And, you know, sure enough, we go and win the Super Bowl that year. And so that one will live forever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Antonio Rossetti, West Hills Gazette. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, you had an absolute shootout with the Cardinals and Larry Fitzgerald back in 2016. You played against Luke a ton, Adam Vinatieri. Like, what's it like to now go from playing against them to now going side by side with them into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah. It's incredible. You know, I don't know if there's a player I have more respect for in the league than Luke Kuechly. And obviously I played against him twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year when he was with the Panthers. And it was always, I never had to prepare harder for a team than when I knew I was going up against a Kuechly-led defense. He was that type of player, and you could tell he was that type of leader and that type of teammate too, just the way that guys would respond to him. Just a generational type player. And so I always felt like, you know, he certainly brought out the best, you know, in me, because I knew we had to just be so on point when we played against him or he would ruin our day. You know, Larry Fitzgerald has always been one of my favorite guys in the league. We've always had a real special bond and friendship. It was funny because the thing I most looked forward to in the Pro Bowl was to play with Larry. Because I knew they were going to never let him out of Arizona, and I wasn't going anywhere either. So I knew that was my only chance to throw to my guy. So we had some great Pro Bowl moments together, and then we would do a lot of things in the off season. And then Adam Vinatieri, hard to believe, the guy really had a Hall of Fame career with two different teams. When you really break it down, his longevity, how long he played, how clutch he was. He was a part of some of the biggest moments in Super Bowl history. That's pretty awesome when you look at the class. Obviously paired with Roger Craig, and what he meant to that Niners organization for so long, especially during a lot of their championship runs, and how he revolutionized the game. It's an incredible class, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, you said you picked New Orleans because it had great fan base and a great atmosphere. Can you explain what it was like when Gleason blocked that punt against the Falcons?
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, like, if you ever just put a camera on me or watched me while the other team was punting, I was always at the other end of the field because we're waiting for the punt to come down to our end. And I was always kind of like stretching and just getting my mind right, and especially in that moment because that was our first game ever in the Superdome for many of us. And, obviously just the gravity of the moment. It's Monday Night Football. We're undefeated. We're playing against the Falcons. They were the division winner the year before. They're a great team. And so you're just, you're just trying to block out, a lot of what would be perceived as pressure and just focus on your job and focus on the moment. And I just kind of glanced down, and just all of a sudden there's this, what sounded like a shotgun blast, as Gleason was blocking that punt and the ball hitting his hands. And, just the eruption of the crowd. It was as if the roof was going to blow off the dome. And then the feeling of what that represented, it was, I think it was a message to the country, to the world, to everybody that, New Orleans was going to come back stronger than ever, and that we as a team were a representation, of our city. And it was, I'd say, next to the Super Bowl, the greatest moment in the history of Saints football.
Hey, Drew. Juan Kincaid from Fox 8. How proud are you of the longevity that you put into the league, 2 decades? And are there any moments that stand out above the others over the 20 years, especially the last 15 with New Orleans?
Yeah. It's, each year stands alone in regards to, the team that we had, the mindset in each offseason, the things that I was personally working on, what was happening in free agency, what happened in the drafts, watching the team come together, the highs, the lows, all the moments that went into creating what became the team that then, you ended up going through the season with. And yet, you develop such a routine, and you just develop these habits. And, so much of my thought process, each and every off season was like, how do you create so much chemistry and connectivity with the guys that are on, your side of the ball? And then the team, the team dynamics, how are we feeding off each other? How are we complementing each other? To me, that's really where a lot of the magic lies on a team, is just how you build that chemistry, and how you build those relationships, and how you build that trust. And so, while there's the X's and O's of the game, and while there's the things that every player is working on just for their own personal development, to me, that was it was the challenge. It was the fun part. It's what got the fire burning was every off season, sitting there looking around at the rest of the guys and just seeing like pieces to the puzzle and like how do we all put this together in a way that's going to allow us to go do something great, do something special, do something that's never been done before. That was the exciting part.
Hey Drew, Sean Wick, WZIP, University of Akron. You started your career with the Chargers, the shoulder injury, and then ultimately Chargers drafting Phillip Rivers. What from the experience of you going to the Saints and that revitalizing your career, winning the Super Bowl, just what did you learn from that experience?
Well, when we all got there in 2006, like if you really start breaking down, a lot of the moves that were made, it's pretty unbelievable. Sean Payton was a first-year head coach who had, been with Bill Parcells and in Dallas for the previous, I believe, 4 seasons, and had certainly kind of grown and developed, as into a great offensive coordinator. Had, was kind of creating his own identity as a head coach. He had these influences from John Gruden and influences from Parcells and that sort of thing, but he was also, formulating, who he was going to be as a head coach and the type of players that he wanted to bring in. But, I mean, man, there were challenges, like, a lot of, you had to really have a vision, not just for the guys that you wanted, but for the guys who were looking at New Orleans saying, man, I'm going to a place that literally was devastated, 6 months previous. And there was all kinds of doubts. And, in some cases, I look at the very first free agent signing that year was Scott Fujita. Scott Fujita was a linebacker who had been drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. I had played against him when I was with the Chargers. And then Fujita had gone to Dallas for a short stint, hadn't really had a chance to play. And so, Scott's kind of looking for a home and maybe not a lot of options. And it's like, okay, well, I'll follow Sean Payton to, New Orleans. And then it was me. And then all of a sudden it was like these pieces just started coming together. And it was, in some cases, it was a trade. We traded our center, LaCharles Bentley, and we get Jeff Fain, from the Cleveland Browns, who, again, hadn't played very much, and all, he's going to be our center. And then Hollis Thomas was part of a trade later with Philadelphia. And then, we trade for Scott, we get Scott Shanley and we get Terrence Copper. And like all of a sudden, Reggie Bush falls to us with the second pick. And so you just think about all the things that happen. We draft Jari Evans, we draft Zach Streif, we draft Marcus Colston. So Roman Harper, man, that was quite a draft. What those guys became, not just as players, but as leaders and as members of the community and as just pieces to this incredible fabric that became, the foundation of our team and our program. Like even after those guys, retired or went other places, the foundation was built and they built it. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of. Obviously I had a chance to play a really long time. And so I was the part of a lot of different, teams and generations of teams, throughout the course of that period of time. But it all goes back to the foundation that was built from that really 06 to 09 group that came in, whether by trade, whether by choice, whether by draft, and fulfilled that vision that Sean and Mickey Loomis, our general manager, had for what we could create there. Yeah.
Hey,
Go
Drew.
ahead.
Nathan Brown with the Indianapolis Star. I know you spoke earlier about your appreciation for playing for Purdue in college. Was there one particular lesson or a couple lessons that you felt like helped set the foundation for your career in the NFL that you learned while playing at Purdue?
At Purdue? Well, first off, the Big Ten Conference is, at that time, was coming off of a national championship in '97 with Michigan, '98. I guess that was Tennessee, but like you had Wisconsin, you had Penn State, you had Michigan, you had Ohio State, you had Michigan State. I mean, you had 5 or 6 teams in the Big Ten at the time that were top 15 in the country. We played Notre Dame every year, top 15 in the country. So you just looked at the level of competition, number one, and you were playing against the best of the best. And so week in and week out, I'd really say in many cases we were an underdog. You know, so you were always having to punch above your fighting weight. Like you were having to scratch and claw and just play with this giant chip on your shoulder. And so I think that alone was what helped, I think, mold and strengthen a lot of us. Like we always felt like we had something to prove. And we always felt like we had an opportunity to, you know, be David in a David and Goliath story, right? Couple that with this offensive style of football that was, you know, throwing the ball 50 times a game, you know, which nowadays that may not seem like a big deal, but at the time in the late 90s, the opportunity to do something like that, just think how much you can develop. You know, you're throwing the ball that much, that means you're having to understand coverage. You know, offensively, the system was putting a lot in my hands in regards to, you know, changing and getting to certain plays, having to recognize where the problems would lie in protection and then how you combat that. You know, putting a premium on completions because we're a high pass offense. So again, it's like the pass is an extension of the run. You know, they put a lot in my hands as far as running the football, you know, so it's a lot of QB draws, it's a lot of read options and RPOs and different things. And so I just felt like what I was exposed to was putting a lot on my plate and forcing me to have to learn very quickly and then be in control and command of the game. And then couple that with the fact that you're just playing against some of the best players and best teams in the country week in and week out. I think it just kind of put us all on the fast track to, you know, very quickly develop and make us NFL ready.
Hey, Drew, congratulations. Troy Davis from Spotlight Media, YSN. Hey, your career kind of matches your book and coming back stronger from where you played to who you are and what you've done. Where inside of Drew Brees does that come from? I mean, what is the battle back, the comeback, the bringing your teammates along, the bringing communities coming back stronger? Where's that coming from?
You know, I came from a very competitive family background. You know, I had a lot of athletes in my family going back to my grandparents. I also came from a military background from that perspective in that, you know, I had grandparents and family members who served in our military. And so I think there was always this feeling of service, of sacrifice, of, you know, being a part of something greater than yourself, being a great member of a team, being a great teammate, but also just this love of sports and competition. And so you combine all those things together. You know, I was a kid who just could not get enough of playing ball. You know, whatever it was, you name the sport, I wanted to play it. Thank goodness I had a little brother who was my running mate, and we just did these things together, you know, all day long. And so as I look at my childhood, it was nothing but being in competitive situations with teammates that I love to be around. And inevitably, you find yourself in situations where, you know, maybe you're outmatched and you're kind of having to figure it out and you're having to overcome adversity, and you just learn so much from that. Like that sharpens you, but it also gives you a belief and a confidence that no matter what, you know, with the right people and with the right mindset, you can find a way. And, you know, think about how that mindset applies to anything in life. And I look to, you know, I went to a high school program that was a very well-known high school program in the state of Texas, but we had never won a state championship. And I remember we had a special group of seniors, and we said, let's be the first ones to go win a state championship for our high school. And sure enough, we were able to do that. I show up at Purdue University. We're dead last in the Big Ten my freshman year as far as a recruiting class. And we all look at each other and say, by the time we leave here, we're going to be Big Ten champs. And we were, right? Show up in San Diego, and we were 1-15 the year before. You know, they had the first pick in the draft. And they draft LaDainian Tomlinson. They bring me in the second round, and we look at each other and said, by the time we leave here, we're going to be champs. 3 years later, we're division champs. You know, you get to New Orleans. New Orleans coming off Katrina had you know, never had you know, a ton of success, and you know, let's win one for this city, and when we win one. So I don't know, I guess just every step of the way, it's always been there's a new set of challenges, there's a new goal, and yet that mindset of, you know, belief and confidence, and you know, developing trust and chemistry and camaraderie with the guys around you, and then just feeling like you can do anything together. That's what it's all about.
All right, thank you.
You got it.